The Evolution merger strategy for membership groups. What is it and how can you use it to create a business? That's what we're talking about in this video. So what is the Evolution merger strategy? Well, this strategy was created based on the usual arguments that normally pop up when mergers happen. If you've not seen my video on the nut and bolt strategy, go and watch that one next. But before we get into this, let's talk quickly about how you would normally do a merger between two or more companies. And for this example, we'll keep it simple and we'll just use two companies that are coming together. So let's say you find a company that it makes sense to acquire it, and by acquiring it, you create all these synergies between the two businesses, like cross-selling your product offerings to the clients and vice versa. But you approach the owner of the business and they say they aren't interested in selling, but they can see the benefits of coming together. And so you decide to merge the two companies together. So how would you do that? We'll talk about the normal way of doing it, and then we'll talk about this alternative method. So the first thing to do is you'll set up a new business that will be a holding company for both your business and theirs. So this new holding company will own both your business and their business. And in simple terms, you'll take your shares in your existing business and you'll swap them for shares in this new holding company. Next, now how to do that is you'll use a metric that works for both businesses. And normally that will be based on profit. The higher the profit, the more equity that you own in this joint holding company structure. So let's use an example. When you first set this up, you'd probably want to take the average profit across the last 2 or 3 years. And you do this because otherwise it can be easy for either side to manipulate the profits to be higher in the current year and then take a higher percentage. But if you've got 100,000 profit and the other business has 150,000 profit, then that's a combined profit of 250,000. So you'd calculate what the contribution to that was from each business. So in your case, that would be 40%. So you take 40% equity in the new holding company, and the other business owner would have the 60%. So the idea is you'd want to use this strategy to add in lots of businesses to this structure. So you might have 5 or 6 companies, and each owner owns, say, 15% of the holding company. Now, to make this work properly, you have to have proper agreements of who will do what, as well as who makes the decisions. One argument we hear a lot is that you don't want to be told what to do by the other business owners. So that's why everything needs to be set up properly from the start. Now, some of the problems that pop up with this is, first of all, whose name you'll use for this joint company. Now, personally, I think the easiest way around this is to have both companies just keep their existing brand and then set up a new brand where you can tell everyone that you're part of the ABC group or whatever you decide to call it. But that group brand name isn't connected to either business. That way, nothing changes in terms of your identity and nobody's ego gets hurt. But it gives you that connection to the other company, so it's easy to do things like cross-selling to their clients and vice versa. The second point, which is more what this strategy is about, sometimes you'll find that one business might be aggressively growing while the other is just ticking over. But let's imagine the previous example. Let's say you're the business with a 40% equity, but within 2 years, you've tripled your profit and you've now got 300,000 in profit, whereas the other company is still making 150,000 in profit. If your equity stake was still the same, you'd be pretty annoyed. So what do you do? What you do is to rebalance the shares every year based on that metric that you used. That way, it encourages everyone to be growing so that they can maintain the same level of ownership or increase it. It becomes a bit of a competition. Now, obviously, it doesn't really matter what the amount of equity each person owns, unless you're selling the group. And you should have a rule for things like dividend distribution before any of this was set up anyway. The other issue we've touched on, you don't want someone else in the group telling you how to run your business. So the answer to this is each business operates independently. While the part of this group structure, each continues to operate as they did previously. A good example of this is in the corporate world with Berkshire Hathaway. Now, Berkshire Hathaway are an investment group that buy up lots of companies. They own companies like Coca-Cola, Kraft, and Duracell. And all of these companies operate as standalone businesses. And this is no different. It works the same way. Then the third issue is direction, especially when you've got a group of businesses each operating independently. It becomes a bit like an octopus, where one leg is trying to go one direction and the other leg is trying to go the other. There's nobody driving the overall group, and it's generally going around in circles, not really getting anywhere. So to get around this problem, if you put someone in place to drive the combined group of companies, by that I mean they work with each business to determine a growth strategy and a plan to get there. They also oversee things like cross-selling. They look for ways that could benefit both companies, such as sharing resource or ways to cut costs. For example, they might notice that you've got two businesses, each operating fairly close to each other from your own buildings, and those buildings cost, say, £20 a square foot each. But if you were to put both businesses in the same building, perhaps even on separate floors, you could reduce that cost down to £15 a square foot and have a better quality building along with it. If it's this person's job to identify these various strategies and then see them through. And sometimes people think this person will become your boss, but actually they're working for you. You are the shareholders of the group. They're paid to squeeze out as much benefit for both businesses as possible. And if you don't like how they do things, you're the shareholder. You just fire them and find somewhere else. By having this person, though, they create a strategy for the combined group. They might find other companies that can be added to the group, but ultimately they keep you heading in the same direction. Because let's say both businesses, they decide they want to target a new sector. Your business wants to target the hospitality sector, whereas the other business wants to target the manufacturing sector. Well, how much cheaper would it be if you both focused on one sector this year and then did the second sector next year? Without having this person driving it, setting the strategy with both companies, then you both go pulling in different directions, when you could focus your combined efforts on one and recover your investment much faster. So what are the benefits of using this strategy? Well, the obvious one is you can rebalance the shares. It encourages everyone to keep growing, and so everyone benefits. The second benefit, let's say one day you wake up and you decide you want to sell your business. Now, the cost of getting the business ready to sell, then looking for a buyer, it would be a full-time job for at least 12 months. And then you'd have to have a tie-in. That might mean you're still there 3 years after the sale's completed. And that's if you manage to find a buyer at all, because 98.7% of businesses listed with the brokers never sell. With this model, you're already working with people within that group structure anyway. They know your business. They know everything is operating okay. So what you can do is you just agree to sell your shares to the other businesses in the group. That way you get your money and you aren't tied in. You aren't tied in for 3 years with the new owner trying to find excuses not to pay you the money. And the best part of all, it can happen immediately. It's already part of your group structure, so you don't need to prepare the business to sell or start trying to find a buyer. It happens straight away. Within 3 months, you can be out of the business and working on new projects. Now, the other query some people have is what happens if one of the companies in this new group, what if they have bad times and they don't make a profit? That could obviously impact the whole group. And in that case, you have two options. You can agree to keep them in the group and just adjust the shareholding structure, or you can unwind them from the group structure as if they were never involved. If you think back to the rebalancing of the shares that we talked about, well, if the balancing is based on profit and one business doesn't make any profit, well, that would mean their shareholding is zero anyway. But it might be that keeping them in that group structure has value to the other businesses. So in that case, you might want to remove them from, you might not want to remove them from the group. So instead, you might give them a nominal 5% shareholding and help them turn it around. It's really up to you. There's no fixed rules. The other benefit of using this strategy is the larger the combined group is, the larger the contracts you can take on. Normally, when you tender a contract, they'll only award you a contract that's worth, say, 10% of your total revenue. So if you've got $500,000 in revenue, the maximum contract you'll get is 50,000. But if you're part of a group doing combined 5 million revenue, then suddenly you can access contracts up to 500,000 instead. There are lots of benefits to this strategy, but the last one I want to touch on is the value of the combined businesses packaged within this group structure. I won't go into detail here, but go and watch my other video on the arbitrage strategy, and you'll see what I mean about combining that with this strategy. The last thing I want to talk about is companies that already use this strategy. And sometimes people tend to think that these strategies are theoretical or they won't work for them. So I wanted to use one example that is very public. So much so that it's actually a public company that my partners set up by using this strategy and then took it public. So not only did the strategy work of putting the companies together, but it also stood up to the scrutiny that these companies go through when you get listed on the stock market. So this particular company is called MBH Corporation. It's registered in London and it's listed on both the Frankfurt and Dusseldorf stock exchanges. Now, this was set up. MBH is a holding company where they brought a number of companies together and then they listed the MBH holding company on the stock exchange. Now, with MBH, they only take companies into that group that have more than 1 million EBIT or profit. They have to be debt-free, and the owners have to be joining the group as a means to grow. They can't join and then choose to sell the shares a few months later. But that's just the rules that they've set for MBH. Now, the main reason for setting up MBH and taking it public was to take advantage of the arbitrage strategy, which we discussed in another video. But after it went public, obviously each business owner in that group then had publicly traded shares, and as a public company, they obviously had more credibility when they were talking to new clients. And their shares were worth more than if they'd stayed private. By the way, if your business fits these criteria, I'm happy to have a conversation and talk about whether MBH would be a good fit for your business. Or otherwise, there's always other projects that might fit your business better, especially if it's not at that 1 million profit level yet. As a business, you can set the rules to suit you. They just did it this way because they knew they were taking the group public and they needed to have those specific rules so it didn't damage the share price if one company came in and didn't work to those rules, for example. But this is how you use the evolution merger strategy to grow your membership group.